Let's unravel Geeta's world. Hi everyone, this is the 84th episode of Geeta's World. And before I welcome Geeta, before I ask how she is, I think we should together
wish everybody
a
very happy Holi.
I mean, in India, we have been celebrating for the past 2 days.
In some
Today
parts,
instead,
it'll continue because it
like
doesn't
in my
stop
part,
for them.
in Bihar, UP, they're still celebrating. It's just not
It
ending.
doesn't stop. They say it goes on for 3 days,
Yeah.
like Eid.
Like Eid, yeah.
But Anna, that's the whole thing about Holi. It's a festival to be celebrated with those who want to celebrate it.
Yeah.
But those who don't want to celebrate it, we saw some very nasty visuals and troubling visuals of people forcing people who don't want to be colored or play with the colors, or because of their faith they don't want to being troubled. That's not acceptable because we're a country that's a tolerant, beautiful, diverse nation, and we should celebrate that with all the colors.
Definitely.
These colors actually mean diversity,
Yeah.
So we should celebrate that. So let's end the conversation on a happy note, saying that celebrating diversity, happy Holi.
Yeah, happy Holi. But just one thing, gender and faith, both. So consent is something that I think we should be reminded on a special occasion such as Holi, where we just don't know about the concept of consent. So that's that. But unfortunately, I mean, we started on a good note, but our spirits are sort of tempered by the somber events that happened in Moscow, which will be the point of discussion this episode. It happened on 22nd of March, right, on Friday. The attack was at Crocus City Hall music place near Moscow. And there was a Russian band called Picnic, which was about to perform to a sold-out crowd. When what really happened was that there were 4 attackers who entered the venue. And they started attacking, shooting people. In fact, they used knives. And then they burnt the place down with special devices. And as now we record, I think the death toll is around 137. And more than 180 people are injured due to gunshot wounds and poisoning related to the fire. Meanwhile, the Islamic State Khorasan Province, which is ISISK, I think this
ISKP. Yeah.
ISKP.
ISKP, but normally Islamic State, yes.
Yes. So these are the abbreviations that we'll be using during the conversation. So what exactly is ISKP? It's an Afghanistan-based regional affiliate of the Islamic State, and they have claimed responsibility. And to corroborate this, they also released a video which is, I think, a 90-second video, which is very graphic, extremely graphic. I did not have the courage to watch it. It showed the attackers, shooting victims and, in fact, slitting the throat of one of the victims. So, and they also, while filming, the attacker is praising Allah and speaking against infidels. So that's there. And what has Russia's reaction to this be? I mean, Vladimir Putin, he has said that this attack is like it's very barbaric terrorist attack. But also, I think what's the point of discussion that we will also, dive deep into that is that it took 19 hours for Vladimir Putin to actually come out and address the media. Although in the first addressal, he did not really, acknowledge the fact that it's actually the Islamic State which is behind it. And in fact, he pinned the blame against Ukraine. But later on Monday, he did acknowledge that Islamic State is behind it, but he maintains the blame against Ukraine. So we'll discuss that, and we'll try to look at this horrendous, attack that has happened. What are the implications? What does it actually mean to Russia and the world? And, what, I mean, can we actually say that it's actually Ukraine, or this is a massive, failure of intelligence and security agencies of Russia. To begin with, Geeta, I think the most important question, I was having a chat with my dad also yesterday, and he also prompted me this, that why would the Islamic State, if it's true, attack Russia? Because I think for laypersons like me and many don't really know the history behind Russia and the Islamic State. There are several attacks, which I found it in my research. There are several attacks, I think in 2022, 2023, in Kabul, the horrendous attacks, which you'll explain. So what could the possible motive be? Can you explain that? And meanwhile, while you explain it, also we should, I think, also understand how is ISIL's Afghan branch, the ISIS-K, different or sort of aligning with the main ISIS ideology.
It's a very important question, but let me begin with one thing, and that's very important because we're discussing war and conflict.
Yeah.
In any war or conflict, Anna, the biggest victim is always the truth. Because there is so much of misinformation, disinformation, truths, half-truths, untruths, that you need to decipher, you need to sift through all of that to know what is.
Yeah.
Now, on that, a lot of people can editorialize, can come to a certain conclusion or not. But let's speak facts on the ground, how it happened. Coming back to your question, you've asked a very important question before we discuss the events itself, but let's begin with that.
Yeah.
Now, what is the Islamic State? Islamic State, or ISIS, or Daesh as it's called in some parts of the world, which earlier was known as ISIS. There are many affiliates, there are many organizations, smaller groups that are affiliated to the Islamic State. But Islamic State particularly is a very hardline, extremist, Sunni group.
Yeah.
Now, and that's why, again, you look at the region, you look at countries, and you look at geopolitics. Why is the Islamic State looking at Russia?
Yeah.
Russia has been fighting with Assad regime against the Islamic State or rebels, so to say, in Syria. Both. Now, I'm saying this because they call, the West calls them rebels against the Assad regime. They say that they're all part of the Islamic State. It becomes a huge, the difference is drawn by the border. On the other side of the border, they'd be called Islamic State. But on this side, since it's a regime that is known as an authoritarian regime that needs to be taken down, here they're rebels. Either way.
Yeah.
It's the Russian support to these Shia-dominated countries that makes the ISIS their bête noire, their enemies. And Russia also continues to support Iran.
Exactly.
Again, another Shia state. Another state that has support of Russia, and a state that supports organizations such as Hezbollah, Hamas, of course, is not Shia, but that's another Palestinian cause, which we discussed in another episode, saying that it's the Palestine cause that has united the Arab world, Shia, Sunni, the Persian Gulf, whatever it may be. But this is one of the main reasons why we see ISKP, or for that matter, the Islamic State, target countries such as Russia. Now, after the Crocus City Hall attack, there are other countries that have also been have placed a high level of alert in their own countries, such as France, Belgium. These are countries that have suffered Islamic State attacks not so very long ago. I mean, it has been a while, but they did suffer massive terror attacks, the France terror attack, the attack in Belgium. They were all Islamic State attacks. And so they realize and understand that there is reasoning to this. But then now what we're seeing is the gunmen have been arrested or apprehended. Again, Russia makes no or has no qualms about how they try to get out information out of people.
Yeah, I think on
torture
that
tactics are not something that they're apologetic about. So when you see the faces, all the faces of these men are absolutely swollen. And
apparently somebody, their ears were cut and stuffed into their mouth or something.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. So as bad as that. But this is going to really escalate tensions. It already has between Russia and Ukraine, because according to Russia, according to Putin, President Putin, the men were fleeing towards the Ukrainian border when they were apprehended. According to Ukraine has nothing to do with these attacks. We know that now that you understand that there is a history between Islamic State and Russia,
yeah.
for the kind of support that Russia has for certain regimes, organizations, and which is detrimental to the existence of Islamic State itself. And what is happening over here is that in the recent past, according to some reports, there has been a concerted effort to recruit from Central Asian countries. And when you are recruiting from these parts of the world,
Central Asian as in like Turkmenistan,
yes,
Tajikistan.
yes, all the 5 states.
Yeah.
So if you're recruiting from these areas, and if it's ISKP, Khorasan Province organization that is recruiting, then you have one similar looking or kind of closer looking people, but also Russian speaking.
Yeah.
So to enter Russia or to be in Russia and to target cities within Russia becomes much more easier. So again, we'll have to wait and see how this really pans out, and the origins of the gunmen, where were they recruited from, so on and so forth. But this certainly is one of the reasons why we're looking at ISKP's involvement in these attacks, and them being behind the attacks itself. But more importantly, what Russia's response is going to be, and how now it has become a part of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, where the response against these attacks towards Ukraine could be far, far greater. We've seen the real spike in the missile attacks from Russia into Ukraine. And whilst Ukraine is saying that they're not involved, it doesn't seem like right now that's something that Moscow is going to accept.
Yeah, I think, Geeta, you kind of explained touched upon all these points that I was about to ask you. But, we'll go into Russia's, whether we can actually say it's conclusive that it's the Islamic State is behind it. I mean, like you said, it's quite murkier than it seems. Like we never get the exact information. But staying on the topic of the Islamic State, I just want to recount because let's not be mistaken, like you said, this is not the first time the group has attacked. The ISKP fighters, they claimed responsibility for the 2021 attacks outside Kabul. So I'm just giving you a gist as to the attacks that, this group has been associated with. And I want to bring in Taliban in the picture, which I'll come to later. So I'm just saying that in 2021, outside Kabul airport, there were at least 175 civilians dead. 13 US soldiers were injured. They were killed, and many dozens were injured. Then there was this another attack which ISIL was affiliated with in Kabul in May 2020 that killed around 24 people, including women and infants. I mean, I'm just giving you the mindset, like women who are in the process of giving birth. They killed them. Then in November that same year, they also attacked a girls' college, in which around 20 teachers, students were killed. Then again in September. So I want to bring in Taliban in the sense that, like I said, in September 2022, the group took responsibility for a deadly suicide bombing at the Russian embassy in Kabul. All these attacks showed that the group wanted to give Afghans a sort of a message that, they have a stake in Afghanistan's dystopian future after the West were leaving. Because these attacks were about power, authority, and intimidation. So the Afghans have mostly found themselves sort of sandwiched between Afghans and the ISISK. But now the Taliban are in control of Afghanistan. The point I'm getting at is as if, like, if we try to look at the nexus between ISISK and the Taliban, it's quite murky. I was watching the CNN report that said that was explaining this in detail. It said that ISISK are made up of Pashtuns, both from Pakistan and Afghanistan, and some ISIS fighters are married to Taliban fighters and vice versa. Right. So there's a familial connection to that as well. So regarding reasons as to what could be the most compelling current motivation for ISIS to attack Russia, there are several experts who are saying that it's the Taliban factor, right? Because Taliban is a bitter rival of ISIS, and the ISIS believes that Russia and the Taliban are friends. So, cutting this short, what I mean is that does this attack on Russia also mean that we have a messaging for the Taliban as well? Indirectly.
It could very well be that as well, because we are the Russia Moscow format of conversations and talks on the Taliban and normalization within Afghanistan is something that's a very important. Moscow format is a very important format.
Mm-hmm.
So this engagement between the Taliban, although in the past, the Soviets and Russia really fought bitterly against the Taliban. So it's not a relationship that always saw good times. There have been very difficult times too. But right now, Russia is trying to play, as are many other countries, trying to play a key role in the region. And in that, the engagement with the Taliban, they started the engagement when the West, the United States of America, was discussing negotiating terms and conditions for maybe a change of power or withdrawal of troops, whatever that was. That certainly must not have gone down well with the Islamic State, because they actually are quite again, the Islamic State and the Taliban, how they were fighting, how they were connected. And yes, fighters from various fringe elements and organizations marry into each other's families and have massive connections, irrespective of what their leanings are, or even if they change a little. But over here, yes, it makes for an interesting point that the engagement with the Taliban could also be one of the reasons, but it's just one of the reasons.
Yeah.
Like I said, with Russia, how the Islamic State has looked at Russia has always been like an enemy. Whether if it is in Afghanistan, whether if it's messaging because now the Taliban is engaging Moscow, and Moscow is becoming a player in the region, or for that matter, Russia's stand when it comes to Syria, when it comes to Iran, and all those Shia-based outfits that get a lot of support from Russia. Through Iran or directly, it is another matter. The fact is that over here, they consider Russia as an existential threat for them, because if there is anybody that's taking on the Islamic State, it is these Shia-based outfits or country states like Iran. So that certainly, apart from the fact that there's an entire Western front that is fighting the Islamic State, but sectarian turf and sectarian fights is a very different playground in the Islamic world than many would like to believe. And the West plays the Islamic State or against the Islamic State than against Shia organizations to their advantage. But the fact is that these opposing leanings are more important in the Islamic world than one would really understand. And the layers to that in terms of which country supporting which country is also very important. So yes, I think, this could very well be a factor.
Interesting, yeah. Also the point, where you said, like, we have been discussing, coming back to the attack itself, we can't really say, right, that it's not conclusive that the Islamic State were actually behind it. But the point that I'm making is that with Vladimir Putin actually pinning the blame against Ukraine, well, I mean, it could be very much about the fact that it wants to, he wants to derail the point of the weak intelligence and security failure that happened in Russia. But if we actually believe him, right, that, okay, Ukraine is behind it, the West is behind it, how could this attack, I mean, actually, because if we see, probably they might think that this attack could actually, put a dent to Putin's image. But now, just recently, he's clinched the third presidential, third time that he's the president. He stays till 2030, right, for 6 years. And ever since he has come to power, Putin, since 1998 as the head of the Federal Security Service, then later as Russia's prime minister, then later as president, the country has suffered some 15 terrorist attacks. And almost all have been used by Vladimir Putin to strengthen his grip on power, to bolster his authority. So if actually Ukraine or Russia or the West is behind it, I mean, how is it,
So
benefiting?
just because a leader uses a terror attack, which happens in many parts of the world, by the way, where terror attacks are used to a political party, political leader, or an authoritarian dictator's advantage, does not mean that, and I know where it's coming from. It's coming from conspiracy theories that was it orchestrated within rather than without. I don't think an attack such as the Crocus City Hall attack would be the mind of people within, only to strengthen power. I think Vladimir Putin today is in such a position that even if he has taken down all his opponents, there has been no voice against him. True. He doesn't need this. So when this conspiracy theory is being floated, Anna, you have to ask, does he need it?
Yeah.
Does he need it at all to strengthen from this to what?
Yeah.
Or where?
Exactly.
Because
everything is
international criticism has been there forever since he took office. And yet the world engaged him. When the Crimea War happened and Russia took over Crimea.
In 2014.
Yeah. Yes, in 2014. And the Euromaidan happened. Yet the world continued after a brief period of not engaging Russia, sanctioning Russia, ousting them from the G8. It has become G7 now. Yet the world engaged Russia.
Yeah.
Businesses thrived. So what is the need? I don't think that's a conspiracy theory I can shut down right away without, a question. But propaganda, counter-propaganda is something that you will see. When the Russian president says, and these are just gunmen who have been caught, that no, there is a Kyiv and DC hand, then America is right in calling it, for now, Kremlin propaganda, because there has to be proof. On the other hand, when Ukraine is saying that we are not involved in this, do they have the wherewithal? Do they have the means? How would they have done it? Yeah. They're fighting a war that has not been to their advantage for a while. So these are narratives, counter-narratives. The fact of the matter is that a terror attack took place well within Moscow. Other cities are on high alert and other countries are on high alert. The Islamic State also, Anna, looks for opportunities to strike, whether it is in France, Belgium, or now in Russia. They look for opportunities to send out a message, to signal to the world. And
especially going after such a country which is actually celebrated for its, it's like a brand. Like Russia is known for its security and intelligence agencies.
So there has been a security failure. But then again, what do they say about terror, about attacks and security apparatus? That it takes so much to avert so many attacks. But it only takes one attack for the other side to succeed.
Yeah.
So we don't know how many attacks each country has averted. India has been a target of so many terror attacks, but we don't know how many terror attacks have been averted by the establishment or the United States of America or countries in Europe that have been rather vulnerable in the recent past, with attacks from the Islamic State or radical Islamist organizations. So Russia also, this certainly is a massive intelligence failure. And yes, a lot of people would be questioning the Putin regime. And again, is the reason why should Putin have done that to himself? He was strong enough to be taking on, to be at war with a country, and yet ensuring that the economy does not come crumbling down. So what was the reason right now for him to do so? That's not the story here. The story is the fact that there has been a massive intelligence failure, but we've seen the October 7th Hamas terror attack, and that was a massive intelligence failure too.
I mean,
massive.
The impenetrable Iron Dome.
Was penetrated.
Image,
so the same thing over here, that the fact that after Beslan, showing zero tolerance to terrorism, Russia never witnessed this kind of an attack. And now they have.
I mean, that's what,
somewhere, I think these organizations are also saying that,
yeah,
maybe they don't tolerate or zero tolerance, but we will still carry on what we have to do against countries that they think are against their idea of the caliphate, so on and so forth.
Yeah. Also, when you mention Hamas, I mean, there are reports, initially when the October 7th attack happened, there were reports that Israel actually missed many warnings by Egypt. And this time also, the US has said that they had warned Russia of such and such an attack, was happening. First, how did the US...
No, that's not how it happened. This is an interesting one.
Yeah.
So, the US, after the Crocus attack, had come out and said, when asked about was there any intelligence, they said we had no intelligence on this. Then Russia puts out a statement saying, or Russian agencies and media houses and all, that it was on March 7th itself that America had warned its citizens not to go into large crowds and large gatherings because there could be an imminent attack.
Okay.
But then they say that the US knew about it, and now US is saying they knew nothing about it. That's not how it works. The US knew about an imminent threat, and that was announced, and the US embassy in Russia put out a statement warning US citizens not to go into large gatherings. Did they know specifically that Crocus City Hall would come under attack? I suppose not. So the nuance is in the fact that you're questioning, and the other nation is using it, saying that they knew about it, maybe not specifically,
but they had this idea.
But they did have intelligence, and if a statement was put out, then so did Russia.
But why, if the United States is actually warning, or not warning, but making them aware that such and such a thing can happen? But it's not that Russia can actually blindly trust the United States, right? It's not like US doesn't involve
might not be able to
misinformation.
might not want to trust. But if a statement is put out, you will go through it. You will do your due diligence, and you will put systems on high alert.
Right.
There is no way that you'd not be doing that.
Also,
on intelligence, I don't think you can consider anything as bogus and not do due diligence. That's not how intelligence agencies work. They would have picked it up. It was a statement. It was a public statement. And it was made from DC and was issued in Moscow. So it wouldn't have escaped them. But did they have specific intelligence of Crocus City Hall? I don't think so.
If they had, so that would have been how is the US getting such an accurate intelligence? No,
that would have maybe taken the blame, pointed the finger much towards DC than anything else.
The West, So you never know. They actually might have had the intelligence then. Or they don't want to put it out.
Again,
it's
this
very
is
speculative.
I don't get into that.
Geeta, speaking about it, I personally find it quite strange because over 100 people have died in this attack. And yet, if you see, there's little chatter about it in the news, maybe on social media, but in the news. Probably it has a lot to do with Russia being the aggressor in the Ukraine war. So there's little sympathy for Moscow in the international media. But more than that, what also comes across is a lack of trust in the news that's trickling out of Moscow about the attack, like we discussed. there are, what I read, there are Russian commentators who have written about how it's very strange that ISIS terrorists could penetrate the city where the intelligence agency is like, it's so notorious for picking up anti-war protests or, any sort of dissenters. These terrorists could terrorize a crowd for an hour and a half and then simply run off to somewhere near Russia's border with Ukraine, heavily militarized, where there is little to no chance of literally avoiding arrest. Then the fact that the U.S. embassy had twice, warned Moscow about the possibility of this sort of an attack. So observers predict that Putin is going to use this incident to further galvanize the Russian people behind the war effort.
Absolutely, he's already done it.
I mean, yeah, that's what his first response was. And Biden, if you look at Biden's response, far from protecting Ukraine, his administration is advising Kyiv not to attack Russia's oil infrastructure for fearing of it, causing a rise in global oil prices. And the U.S. has also apparently, backtracked on its promise of providing F-16 fighter jets to Kyiv. So what I'm trying to get at, as if I look at it as a layperson, right? I'd just be aghast and I'd just call it like Ghor Kalyug hai, and then I'll leave it at that. But given that we are students of, and observers of geopolitics, and of course, it's not the first time this sort of thing has happened. I want to understand from you that what is the trend or a warning, if any, that you see here for how the world and the US is going to continue to forgive aggression from authoritarian states in return for little or sort of no accountability whatsoever?
Again, accountability is something that we will have to see because, we've seen a lot happen on the other side of, on the other part, in the other part of the world when it comes to Israel-Hamas as well. But accountability is missing there as well. But coming back to Russia-Ukraine, the fact is that now you spoke about international coverage. I think there was a fair amount of coverage when the attack took place and they were on the story.
Yeah.
But they always shift focus and look at the larger picture. When you zoom out, it is not just about that attack anymore. They know that this attack would mean an escalation. So the entire focus moved out of just the Crocus City Hall attack because, again, the men were caught. Once the men are apprehended, if they wouldn't have been, it would have been a larger story to keep following. But they've been apprehended. So now they know that whatever comes will be coming from Russian authorities and they know how they're zeroing in. But they zoom out to what this attack really means. The fact that they were, according to Russia, caught at the border of Russia-Ukraine, trying to enter Ukraine, is something that the Russians are not going to really, is not an aside for them. It is the main story now.
After being there for 1.5 hours.
Yeah,
That's
after
also,
being there for So, again, one, the fact that there has been intelligence failure. Secondly, sometimes your systems have a laid-back attitude. But over here, that was not the case. So the Crocus City Hall, because it's a city hall, because it's an auditorium, has very specific entries and exits.
Okay.
So when the men went in, when the gunmen entered Crocus City Hall, they first killed the guard, and then they locked up the door.
Yeah.
And then they started with the rampage. Then what happened was that they used their Molotov cocktails and the explosion that led to fire, which made the building quite weak. So there were 3 or 4 things that they had to do. One, first assess how many people are inside.
Yeah.
Because how do you carry out an operation with your special forces entering without knowing how many are inside? But because the networks were open, people were filming and sending things from inside, it was easier for them to gauge. When we had our situation, the 26/11 situation, it went on for hours and days.
Yeah.
Because you did not know how many are trapped, how many are inside. They had shut everything.
Yeah.
They had shut everything, and nothing. They could not. They could not figure out. Nothing was coming out. Here it was almost real time. So it was a 1.5 hour operation. What to you is sounding very long is actually not very long. People are questioning it because they assume and expect that Russia would have done it in half an hour. But it's a terror attack situation with a hostage crisis.
Got it.
And while Russia showed zero tolerance in the Beslan, the dastardly Beslan school terror attack case where they lost a lot of children, but they just had gone in. So these guys also would have gone in, but they were just trying to gauge. The building is coming down, it's crumbling. They tried to douse the fire with helicopters from outside. They already had information on how many people were inside. And then they carried out the entire operation of entering and securing, started rescuing people, getting them out of the building. And in the meanwhile, the gunmen also had escaped the building. And then they were found somewhere closer to the Russia-Ukraine border. So while you're saying, and a lot of people are saying that 1.5 hours, I don't know. I don't know whether if it's a very long time. Sometimes hostage situations take way, way longer. I suppose it did not take as long is because Russia has a zero tolerance to terrorism policy, which means they would have entered irrespective of what the collateral damage would have been.
I understand. I mean, like what you explain is actually...
If these gunmen were inside Anna and they would have taken people hostage, then Russia would have just gone in and annihilated them. In the process, if there was loss of life, there would have been more loss of lives.
Okay.
Because we saw that in Beslan.
Yeah, that's true. But that's what, like just adding to what you said, 1.5 hours, of course, you're saying like it's not that long. But it's just that, afterwards they are actually going and we are finding them across near the border, Ukraine border. So these are the things that they're not adding up for the observers to actually look at.
Maybe.
Yeah.
And we will get to know about details later. It will all come out. Somewhere down the line, there's always a trail and it'll be found. And the Islamic State is also putting out statements. So let's just see, how it pans out. But for now, again, the other thing that you asked about coverage, and you said that, there's a whole thing about it's not just the hours. The fact that the focus was earlier on the attack, and then it moved to... So yes, it is going to move. It is going to look quite severe. Other part that you were asking, Anna, was also about how the West reacts to this and the question of accountability, but also this very important point that you made about how energy infrastructure should not be disrupted. There is a myopic view on self-interest, national interest, that their national interest will trump everything else, which means that whilst they are supporting Ukraine, it is not support that is more than enough. And we know that why, because we heard Zelensky in a very recent statement say that we will not be able to win this war against Russia. That is a very, very strong statement coming in from a war president, a president who's fighting a war. And with the help of the friends and allies who are actually not coming out in support in the manner in which Ukraine would have wanted them to. And so Russia does look stronger. And Russia does have the resources. There's another side story. Now we're talking about energy, where they said that, do not disrupt energy infrastructure because that really disrupts global economy in a very, very big way.
True.
So recently, Russia had put out a statement saying that, UK had said zero fuel from Russia, but it recently signed a deal with France on an oil and gas, and that's the same oil that is being exported from Russia that France imports. So indirectly, you are taking that very same, you are dependent on that very same energy resource or source, which is Russia. So I'm just saying that, yes, they are looking at the larger picture, that any escalation today between Russia and Ukraine would have massive ramifications on the oil industry.
I read this
And
somewhere.
why is the West saying, why is the US saying, do not disrupt the energy infrastructure when they had already said they're not going to take oil and gas from Russia?
Yeah,
Which means they are.
they are, of course. That's what, like I read somewhere, I think it was in the Wall Street Journal, that some uh, person has said, some commentator has said that Biden fears Russian defeat more than Russian victory. So,
It's a good one.
yeah. So, anyway, I think we have more or less covered the attack, and, like sort of speculative, but like we'll be definitely having a closer look. And in case of any interesting and important developments, we'll definitely come back to it. But just lastly, you mentioned, but can we actually say, I mean, no, we shouldn't be that certain, but there are many observers who believe that more such attacks are anticipated because such attacks add to the credibility of armed groups, which then, increases the scope of their funding, their recruitment, propaganda, all the reason why, if this is true, all the reason why they are going against such a country like Russia. And in fact, what I read was that it's ISISK's ideology that inspires them in terms of selecting targets. First of all, like Russia is in Syria fighting against Daesh, like you explained. That means they see such countries as hostile. So, in terms of what countries they are going after, and they are now in Moscow. Previously, they were in Iran, and we will see much more attacks, maybe in other capitals, like you said, France and everywhere. So, how do you think this is going to, if they are actually expanding? In going to European countries. So, how are you looking at it? If we can,
I very see. There's one aspect of conflict and conflict resolution that has not found consensus in the international platform, which is that there is no definition for terrorism. Why so? Because one man's freedom fighter is another man's terrorist.
very true. Yeah.
And till the time the world keeps choosing an organization as a friend, ally, or a terror group, according to their convenience, not shunning violence of any kind outrightly, there is going to be this problem that will continue to exist. And yes, there has to be a distinction that has to be made between freedom fighters, people who do take up arms because of the oppression that they've experienced, as opposed to terror organizations. But the world has to find a middle ground, a space where they can work on fighting extremism. And that is something that I see lacking. So, till the time we have the geopolitics of terror at play, I don't think we will actually see a real resolution to the conflict situations that the world is riddled with. And if the world really wants to make that effort, they will have to find that ground. So till then, I think these are not just organizations, there are going to be many more fringe elements. Renaming is something that happens every time an organization is proscribed. You will see another name coming up, but the leanings will be the same. The modus operandi will be the same. You'll just say that, okay, it's not Jamaat-ud-Dawa, it's Lashkar-e-Toiba now. You see, that's all. That's the only difference.
That's the only difference, yeah. But just as we go, although, I mean, it's very speculative, everything is very speculative. But what seems like more probable to you? It's actually the Islamic State behind the attack, or there could be like a possibility of Ukrainian and the West
No,
being
Anna.
involved?
There is, see, the Islamic State KP, the ISKP has already taken responsibility. They've
Yeah.
claimed responsibility for the attack. The men have been caught. There's a lot of information that's coming in. Putin has said this is a barbaric act of terrorism by an extremist Islamic organization. There is no way of denying that anymore. But
Initially, Putin was.
Yes.
But eventually he did.
But connecting it to a state.
Yeah.
So this is a non-state actor. Connecting it to a state is something that has no proof right now, no legs to stand on. So let's just wait to see how this really pans out. because the other nations have already outrightly rejected any such links to ISKP. And also, look, they're fighting ISKP in other parts of the world. Why would they be connected,
Of
right?
course.
I mean, these are questions that have to be raised and asked. But let's see what is the proof that Moscow really puts out to show any connection between these terror attacks and Ukraine, or for that matter, DC.
Yeah. And what's the news that will be trickling out of Moscow that will also be sort of calculated?
Even now, the fact
Even
that
now.
they've claimed and we're saying it's a claim, we know that, this is how we're going to look at it till they have proof.
So, okay, we'll rest the discussion for now, Geeta. Thank you so much. And in case we witness any more important developments, we'll take this matter and try to understand from that angle that comes to forth. So, thank you so much. And
thank you. It's a developing story. So I'm sure there's going to be a lot that will come. And as and when we have something important, we might revisit the Moscow terror attack episode and abreast our listeners and our viewers of what's really happening. Otherwise, we always have something interesting happening across the world, and you can tune into us.
Yes.
To listen into our perspective, or for that matter, the facts as they are.
Yeah. Definitely. So thank you so much. And do let us know what you thought about this episode. If you have any feedback to share with us, the number is 8588966996 and the email ID is pods@indiatoday.com. Or if you're watching us on YouTube, there's a provision. You could, leave your comments over there. And if you're listening us on any of the audio streaming platforms, please do not forget to, leave a rating for us. That actually matters a lot. So thank you so much, and we'll see you next week.